By the time I was 16, I met a full-on shaman that, I basically walked away from all my friends and only trained with him in the woods every day for years. And I just help people come out of fear and move into trust. But that's a very de-armoring thing. Our fear and is part of our relationships. When we got hurt or when our parents told us to stop doing that, we armor up. And then it's hard to de-armor and receive source support from the sun and the earth, or even from a healer, or from the magic of this lineage. But as people train with me, their perception shifts, their life changes. They start to feel a calling and a longing to reevaluate things and get really honest about where they're at.
And we are live with another episode of Being Human. I'm delighted to say I'm here with Joel Schafer. He is a student of many shamans and a teacher of the Toltec dreaming arts, which is the foundation for the book. For those of you familiar with it, the Four Agreements, as I understand it, that it's the author of that book sources a lot of his knowledge from the Toltec tradition. I'm completely new to all of this, and as I was saying to Joel just before we came on, I'm coming to this absolutely with a beginner's mind, and I can't wait to delve in and gain more understanding of these traditions and get to know you, Joel. So big welcome to the show.
Oh, thanks for having me. I'm so glad to talk about my favorite subject with you. So glad you felt called to reach out and connect. And this work really that I teach comes from the Carlos Castaneda books, where the Don Miguel Ruiz book that you referred to is more of a watered down version of much more advanced explanations, which is a great bridge for people. But the Castaneda material is what, I've learned from and have compared that information to all the shamans that I trained with as a means to have a reference for how shamanism functions. And yes, there's a huge, vast body of knowledge by Carlos Castaneda. He wrote 12 books over a period of 30 some odd years and was a student to a very advanced man named Juan Matus, who also had other students as well. So it's a really powerful lineage.
Wow. Okay. Well, that's interesting, because when you Google Toltec knowledge, that doesn't, it's the Four Agreements that come out. That's interesting. Okay. So a bit about you. I'd love to know a bit of your backstory, Joel. Where did you grow up? What were your parents like? Like just a little bit of a sense of the early Joel before we get into some of your knowledge.
Yeah, thank you. I grew up in a normal suburb outside of Seattle and was just totally normal kid playing sports. I got really good grades. They put me in special schools because I had a high IQ, and I rejected that and ended up kind of rebelling against everything, and was hanging out with older people right away. As soon as I turned 12, 13, I went and learned from people that were breaking the rules and having a lot of fun. So I met a lot of really amazing people at a young time, and it looked pretty sketchy from the outside view, but I just went for it. And so by the time I was 16, I met a full-on shaman that, I basically walked away from all my friends and only trained with him in the woods every day for years. And we were just preparing, we were reading the Castaneda material, utilizing mushrooms and cannabis and LSD and things to open our perception, which I had already had a lot of experience with from 13 to 16. And so I had amazing people in my life. A lot of them were not considered normal. They were more on the schizophrenic side of things, but they were functional, kind of magical perceptions, a little out there. And so we were going to raves, at 15, 16. We were doing very alternative ways of life and reading, Castaneda as a means to understand the more depths of things. So I could have stayed the course. My parents wanted me to embrace what money they had and just do all the normal things, but I left I left home at 16. I went and like lived in the Rocky Mountains with a backpack with a group of powerful people for a period of time in Montana. Ended up living in Montana at a young age, dropping out of high school. I ended up going back and catching up and graduating from high school back in the Seattle area. And then I ended up moving to New Mexico to meet a full-on sorcerer who lived down there, and who my sister had met. After she had trained with my teacher, she ended up going and finding this other man. And he ended up helping me a lot to recover from the first shaman that I was training with, who kind of went into illusions of grandeur and got spun out with his discoveries, which is very common when people, the Messiah complex kicks in, when people start being able to be psychic or telepathic or capable of doing physical fearless things or whatever it is that becomes available. So I'm so thankful for the training, but I'm lucky to have gotten out from that first deal. And then I was in a group of people from all over the world that were training with this old Indian sorcerer shaman down in New Mexico. So I got to meet really unique people that came from all over to train with him. And it was pretty culty as well. It was a commune-based deal. There was Sweat Lodge and Vision Quests and all that. So I jumped in really early to all this intensity, and the story goes on. I end up meeting a lot more shamans over time, but yeah, that was kind of how I got launched into it to begin with.
Wow. Yeah, I'm astonished that it started so early. So, how does a schoolboy meet a shaman and kind of end up in the woods training with him? I mean, what was that first experience?
Yeah, I mean, I always knew this guy. He was around when I was really young, like, and everyone talked about who is this dude, and he was very private. And then, but by the time I turned 16, I knew something. He had figured something out that nobody else that I knew of had. You could just tell. And then it turns out he had discovered the Carlos Castaneda books and just applied his fearlessness to that material. But yeah, it was a very rare person to meet. I've never met anyone like him. The fact that he was grew up in the same town as me is no coincidence. These things happen for a reason. But yeah, there's not a lot of people with my story, because there's not a lot of people like him, not a lot of people like me. And there's kind of a curse and a blessing to that. It's kind of not an easy thing to be out on the edge like that. And, I just felt the need. It was kind of like my future self was informing me that I need to enter into these things. I kind of knew how sketchy it was, but I also felt like that I had to go into the caves of these lions, these powerful people, knowing I was probably going to get a little beat up, but it was just necessary for me to be able to do what I now do with the courses I teach and the people that I help. I have a perspective of how dangerous the path of knowledge can be, and that we could end up losing our marbles in the process or losing our humility. It's a really delicate thing to learn about. And most people that read Castaneda material, either it's too intense or they end up thinking that they are the chosen one and that this material is just for them. And they go into this illusion of grandeur that just seems to be the way in which humanity is they either put themselves above or below. And we don't have that neutrality switch. Makes it possible to just, laugh at ourselves and not take things so seriously. But that's the nature of what the Toltec teachings are, is how to break up that self-importance.
Wow, right. And so this relationship with this initial shaman didn't work out, as you say. He was had these delusions of grandeur, and then
yeah,
you moved. And how was it in the next experience? You said it was a little culty, is that right?
Yeah. So it was like, I went from one really dangerous person to another, but he was less dangerous in a way. So he helped me transition. He helped me a lot. And so did the first guy. It's not like black and white. But yeah, he ended up, he was trained from birth, and he was in his 60s, and he was trained from birth from his grandfather. He was taken from his mother at birth so that he would never feel like domesticated or conditioned. And his grandfather raised him to be a prophet. And so he trained him to not move his perception to the normal domesticated sort of hypnosis that most of us are introduced to by our parents. And so that's what Toltec teaches. We perceive the world the way in which the people that raised us do. And so they pass on the description of reality based on how they interact with it. But if you're raised by shamans who are staring into the abyss all the time, you're not going to be a normal kid. And this guy ended up going to Nam to escape his grandfather. He signed up to go fight in Vietnam at 17 years old to get away from this intense training. He just wanted to be a normal kid, but he got to Nam and he found out there was no way to ever go back to being normal. The Cambodians recognized his power. He became a warlord in a Cambodian village at 17 years old because he was so powerful as a native shaman that they were just fascinated with his rituals and ceremonies and all the stuff he could teach them. He had many wives in that village. You know, he was literally the head dude for a period of time. And he got that village to work with the U.S. Army as a means to help them in what was going on. So he lived a really crazy life. I ended up training with him, you know, late in his life. He had many, many wives in this group that we were in. And that was not so much about having sex with them as about just consummating one time as a means to create an energetic bond for the type of dreaming travels they were doing and learning to find each other in other layers of the onion, other dimensions. He was a really powerful sorcerer. But he was one of these people that wasn't willing to take care of himself because he never had to. He was put through so much discipline at a young age that his power was almost like inevitable, and he didn't have to take care of himself in order to use his power. So
Right.
his lack of love for self, or his inability to, and he was traumatized from Vietnam, and his ancestors were running his life through his dreams. You know, this dude would be standing in the room and all of a sudden fall over, like hit the ground, just totally passed out, and voices would speak through his stomach because he had been taken over by his ancestors and they were trying to get him to resolve spiritual warfare stuff from his past. So part of my training was helping to ward and protect the home from these attacks that would come in from different various people from the abyss in different areas. And people probably think it sounds, you know, too outlandish to be real, but it's really just scratching the surface of what shamans do and deal with. Even in ayahuasca circles, they're throwing energetic darts at different shamanic communities and battling each other in order to sharpen their awareness. So a lot of shamans get into these spiritual warfare situations, and it makes life a lot more intense. Your dreams, your sleep, everything's not normal. You know, it's not a normal life when you're having to protect yourself or do particular things. So a lot of this work, we were training and vision questing and doing sweat lodges and ceremony as a means to try to help him navigate his spiritual battles, but he was training us on how to be able to do this on our own. But yeah, eventually a medicine woman came into this circle of people, and she kind of helped pull one person out at a time and help them see that, you know, this was a really dangerous situation to be in. And then I went and lived with her. Actually, my wife and I had a child by then. We went and lived with her, and then we had another child, and we ended up living with her for a while and helping her through some things while she helped us recover from all of that. And that's where things got really strong, was training with her. She was a really unique medicine woman that could heal really complicated cancer situations for people and was doing deep healing work. So kind of moved out of the more sorcery stuff into the more healing side of it.
Right. And I suppose for people listening to this, who this all seems, you know, pretty out there, maybe we could start with a few of the, I don't know if this is the basics, but what is a vision quest? Let's maybe start there.
4 days and 4 nights without food and water, but people are eating for you, and there's a fire burning centrally that's supposed to help you feel energized. So you go out on the mountain alone, but you're within range that people can hear you drum. And so that if you need to be done with your quest, they can come and help you walk back, because fasting like that and you need to keep your fire burning. So if you fall asleep, then the vision quest is over. So you can't really fall asleep. Otherwise, you need to be done. It just shows that you weren't able to handle it. But the point is to receive vision, to be given like a dream vision, or have a lucid experience, something that helps you realize there's more to this world than, just what we think there is. And so moving beyond the mind, having basically a psychedelic experience without having to take any substances.
Right.
Most people don't realize that the substances are just a tool that moves a mechanism within our energy field that makes it possible to see energy. And then our interpretation of what we're seeing, we call hallucinations. But the Toltecs would say there's no such thing as a hallucination. You're just perceiving something that most people cannot. And the way in which you are interacting with that is not easy to explain. So the goal is to have a vision, to have a hallucination of sorts that would reveal to you that there's more, that there's energy to be witnessed. Like you could see a tree as a tree, or you could get so silent that the tree becomes this beautiful ball of light. And when you learn to move into those different layers of the onion, everything is amazing. Birds, trees, you feel connected to everything. Your perception is not separate from what you're observing. And this incredible harmony comes over you. And you get real purpose and clarity. You feel guided by the earth, the sun. You realize that these are conscious, sentient beings, more conscious than we are, right? Like we're totally under hypnosis, totally cut off from source, compared to these beings that are fully observing us at all times. Like trees are observing us. They're not just trees doing trees. I mean, these are everything: birds, ants, the sun, the earth. And so when you realize that, that's part of the vision quest, is just to come into contact with the fact that things are so alive and that there's so much beauty. But with that comes the realization that, coming out of hypnosis is uncomfortable. It's intense. It's not for everybody, right? So there's some terror. But they say this is a world of terror and beauty, and the beauty balances the terror. And so eventually the fear goes away, and you're able to enjoy your life so much that you kind of end up refusing to live in fear and make the most of your time perceptually. So a lot of people come to these realizations through mushrooms or ayahuasca, but what I teach in the Toltec system is there's a way to get there without having to take any plants of any kind. So there's these movements that I teach and that other people teach as well that break up energetic, stagnant energies that normally people don't know how to get to, and redistribute that energy in a way that makes it possible to heal yourself in profound ways. And that leads to being able to recapitulate. And recapitulation is a tool that Toltecs discovered as a means to have an alternative way of dying. If you can review your memories, a muscle gets built where you can go back into the past and really have very clear access to very details of your memories. And then you can take your essence back from those memories, and it like revitalizes your being, and all your youthful energy returns to you, and all this creativity and imagination becomes accessible. And that's when lucid dreaming gets really, really strong, is because you're collecting your essence and becoming really energized. And so it's a 3-part system. You do these movements. That movements make it easy to recapitulate. The recapitulation makes it so much easier to control your dreams and have that. Toltecs say they live 23, 24 hours a day because they don't fully go to sleep. they stay conscious while they're traveling in those dream worlds.
And is that the phase that you've reached where you don't fully follow?
I'm still a novice. It's really hard to stay awake to stay conscious in your dreams, but that's the goal. And I work with people who are able to do that, but they're way beyond that. They can walk in and out of other worlds like you and I, get in our car and get out of it. They're just fully activated dreamers that are able to just place their attention in other layers of the onion. And my elder was like that. If you came in the room and interrupted him while he was traveling in other worlds, it was like an animal would come out of him, like, because he was so far away. And then when you wake him up from that, even though he's fully awake, he's so deeply in other layers that, this anger comes out because you were about to complete a task and now somebody pulled you out of it, right? So it's a really deep state of focus. And so I'm just developing that capacity to go deeper and deeper into silence. And I practice doing that by staying in pitch black, dark rooms. And when you stare at the darkness with your eyes open, eventually these colors show up on the periphery, this like purple fog. And then you can enter dreaming through that fog because it like turns into faces or landscapes. And then you can go inside of a dream consciously that way. Or you can wake up in your dreams and realize, whoa, I'm in a dream and I can do this and that. They say, look at your hands as soon as you realize you're in a dream. And then look to the next item and the next item and try to stay in that particular story because it's about to shift. Your aunt suddenly is your boyfriend, your girlfriend. Everything's just moving and changing, people's shape shifting, and it's you have to figure out how to learn how to control your dreams in order to walk and use them in powerful ways and understand how dreaming works. And there are other beings that you're interacting with when you're in dreams, interdimensional beings that are trying to teach you how to dream so that they can offer you to come into their world. And it's really dangerous to become an aware dreamer without being trained. So the Toltec, the Castaneda books actually teach you kind of the pitfalls and a way of life that you can learn to live that will ensure that you don't get lost out there.
Right. And how do you know it's not just your imagination? Presumably you get that question.
I mean, I'm open to being wrong at any point. I could be just properly having a massive hallucination of experiences. But when you hang out with people that are doing the same, the conversations you have and the shifts of perception that occur, and you compare notes with other people that are doing this work, and you truly stop caring whether people believe you or not, or whether they think it's, realistic or a form of illusion of grandeur. But the reality is we don't know anything about what we are. And that's the most arrogant and ignorant thing one could think, is that we've figured anything out whatsoever. We've been lied to on purpose so much that it proves there's an inverted opposite of what's actually going on, and that we're under the influence of sorcerers who benefit from us remaining basically retarded and cut off from what is really going on. And so there's great pressure by the forces that act upon us to disregard the simplicity of what I'm talking about. That the earth is sentient, that the sun is consciousness, that we can return to communication telepathically and do remote viewing and do all these incredible things in order to reactivate what's dormant within our magical awareness. So we've been deceived.
Right. And I hear remote, because as I said to you before I came on the show, like 5 years ago, I could never have managed. I'd be having a conversation with a teacher of Toltec dreaming arts, right? I've been on, I've opened up hugely, and I think the availability of the internet is a big, and podcasting and so on is a big part of that. But certainly, remote viewing is something I've become more familiar with, and that there are, as I understand it, the CIA even had done experiments with this, and so there's some some level of sort of rigor around the experimentation on this. I saw a documentary recently where there seemed to be some fairly well constructed experiments around remote viewing that appeared to prove its efficacy. So, could you explain what remote viewing is, and have you experienced doing it?
Yeah, I mean, we have an astral body that we can use to go explore other parts of this realm and other realms themselves. And once you activate that astral body, you're able to peer into other worlds. You could go and spy on a situation if you wanted to do that. It's kind of a weird thing to do, but like it's part of the training is learning how to validate that you're actually viewing something. It might start off that you do some remote healing, long distance healing work, where like a shaman is, like I had injured my back and was living in the mountains in a tent in Colorado, and this medicine woman found out because I don't know, I left a voice message with somebody. I didn't have a phone. This was a long time ago, and all of a sudden I'm in my tent and my back is just heating up and sweating when it was freezing out. Like made no sense to me what was happening. But it was so thankful because I was in so much pain. I was a carpenter and I'd hurt myself pretty bad. But I experienced a long distance healing from this woman without even knowing that she was going to do it. And it was very validating to me how much healing occurred, how quickly, based on how my back usually responded. It was a significant experience that kind of opened the door for me to be open to how this might work. Over the years, I've learned to glimpse or even have future, like I'll have a dream that ends up happening in real life. I'll be in a place that I've never been, and I'll be lucid in my dream and I'm taking note. And then months or years later, I'm in that very situation, precisely, exactly, without all details in place.
And could you, what's the example? Or what's that example?
I mean, I've had many, I'll just be driving down a road I've never been in the passenger seat. And, all of a sudden I realize this is the dream I had, that woke me up more than anything. Like there's gates of dreaming. And when you wake up in the third gate of dreaming, it's more real than the dream you and I are having a conversation in now.
I've heard people say that these states are more real than I have heard a lot of people say that.
Yeah, we are in a phantom world. We're in an illusion, like a spell. And if you could stay silent for a long period of time, the world that you think is in front of you would go away, and there's another world beyond it. But if you try to stay silent, you'll find that there's no way to do it. Your mind won't stop. It's like a radio channel you can't turn off. And when you realize that, you start to realize that these aren't even my thoughts. This is a program that's running, and everyone thinks they're thinking thoughts, but in reality, they're not thinking their own thoughts. There's a natural mind, and then there's this foreign installation that's been given to us. So we've been outmaneuvered. We're not the top of the food chain. There's something that's controlling humanity. And shamans are the only ones I know that make an effort to come out of that control by stopping their mind, which is stopping that channel. And then their natural mind comes on board. And it's kind of bitter and pissed off because its job is to guide us and it's been cut off. So it takes some coaxing to get it to start to speak louder, because it's like a soft voice that tells you really beautiful guidance, but we don't usually listen to it. But when you start listening to that more natural guidance and everything, your life gets really harmonious. You come out of materialistic fears and insecurities around finances. You stop living your life based as if you're not going to die. You start behaving as if you could die any moment. And that's the point, is we behave as if we're immortal, even though we're mortal.
Right. And that's part of the unreality, right? That we kind of live, I suppose we all live in a denial that we could all die at any moment, right?
Yeah, that's what makes us so easy to control, is that we're just not really aware of how amazing it is to be here. We take it all for granted. But if we could stop doing that, each one of us, one at a time, could change everything that's happening, just because the more people that wake up to the true nature of reality, it's like the 100th monkey
Right.
thing. It's just everyone is finally given permission to do the thing that, it's like one person one day will think of one thing that will change the way everyone does everything forever.
Yeah. That reminds me of, this is a lot more prosaic than what you've just described, but apparently with rat mazes, right? You teach one rat a maze anywhere in the world, all other rats are then statistically more likely to solve that maze.
Yep. Or inventors. Like I had one of my martial art teachers was always trying to come up with inventions with carburetors as a mechanic. But there was always a guy that was like a day ahead of patenting the next thing. They were always chasing each other because they were on the same wavelength around the evolution of of these mechanical instruments. So it's crazy to be aware of that there's something assisting and interfering.
Right. And the other thing you mentioned earlier is this idea of spiritual warfare. So I think there's one thing to imagine that the trees are balls of light, and I can communicate with the ants, and it's all harmonious and wonderful. And on one level, that's like, oh, okay, give me more of that, right? That sounds like a more enjoyable walk through the park. But the idea that I need to go and battle evil entities is less appealing. But
Well, and you don't have to. That's the cool thing. Certain people can't help themselves. That's what they get into. That's kind of the nature of who they are. But there's a way to, what Carlos Castaneda said, the battle is in the chest. It has to do with your path of heart, you falling in love with your existence and learning to properly celebrate it. You develop your dance of power to where you're able to heal your energetic self through the way in which you express yourself. And they say death will honor your final dance so that you can say goodbye when it's time to leave. And it just brings more beauty to the whole thing. So the battle isn't with, a lot of people get into these battles in the spiritual warfare, but the real battle is with turning that program off, that radio channel, those thoughts, learning to silence them. That's where the real warriors are cultivated. The other stuff is a distraction that most shamans get seduced by. But it's no joke. Like when I first left that first shaman, every night in my dreams, I was battling him every dream, and I'd wake up every couple minutes because they were so uncomfortably intense. So in order to get away from him, I had to go through really, really difficult stuff for years. And it wasn't so much just about me. It was that the woman that he was training and at one time was together with ended up coming into the world that I was in. And so it was
physically or spiritually?
both. Yeah.
Oh, both. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. And so he was left behind, and ended up trying to like start another group, and they did, I'm sure, but my point is that spiritual fear is a stage that most people don't skip. So becoming activated as a dreamer is going to be intense. And being able to see energies, you're going to go through stages of feeling like, that there's interference, that you start to become aware of. Like if you get in a fight with your partner, it's like there's the forces that love to make that fight go worse so that they can come feed off the negative energies that come from that. So you could be having a really not that complicated of a situation, all of a sudden turn into this huge thing because we're not aware of how susceptible we are to forces that are what we call spirits of trauma.
Right. Yeah. And it's interesting for me because I feel like I'm just starting to step my toe into this world. So as you speak, there's like this real-time processing that, okay, so these aren't just sort of psychological and emotional processes that I have, gained understanding of. And that's how I sort of navigate my reality and make sense of my world is basically at a sort of biochemical, emotional level. And it feels like a big breakthrough just to be at the level of feeling and not just intellectualizing everything. But your suggestion is that there's a level beyond that, and that there may well be not just sort of my spirit interacting with another person's spirit, but other entities in the game as well.
Yeah, it's once you see it, you can't unsee it. And it makes so much sense once you realize what's going on here. Because it's like you look around, like, why are we just self-destructing ourselves? Like, what is play? But once you understand that there's a parasite involved, there's something that is, intending for it to go this way. And it's all why shamans sound so crazy. They're observing something that most people cannot witness. And so, it's very confronting, but it's really helpful to come to terms with what is actually going on. And then you can start to understand it slowly and carefully without overwhelming yourself. But all the labels we were given are all human labels, schizophrenia, all these stuff. But if you really want to go find out where all the really gifted ones in, they're probably all locked up in mental wards because they had a gift that was then considered, something not to, that needs to be controlled. But in reality, if those people, a lot of them, not everyone, but a lot of them, if they had proper training, their gifts could be utilized for most incredible things, and we would be in a totally different situation than we are. And this all goes back to the witch hunts when the conquistadors came to get rid of all the Toltec dreamers, and they hunted them, and no rock was unturned. Like it was the most thorough. And that's why Toltecs are so advanced now, is because they had to figure out how to hide, not under rocks, but in other layers of the onion, and come in and out of those layers and back into this one and train people. And it all had to go underground and became very secretive. So reading the Castaneda material will change your life once you realize that it's actually real information. It's not made up.
Right. There's two points I had. So I want to come back to Castaneda, but firstly, I just want to throw in, are you familiar with the telepathy tapes?
I just found out and I can't wait to check them out. But
I guess for you, for me, it was like mind blown. For you, it's like, yeah. But the study is on these non-verbal autists. That's the subject of the documentation, and these extraordinary powers, these telepathic powers, the telepathy tape. And not just that, but they're so rigorous in proving the ability of these individuals to, in effect, look through the eyes of others, declare what somebody else in another room is seeing, or reading, or thinking, and just time and time and time again, this documentary offers credible proof of these abilities, and it's impossible to not come away from having watched that documentary, at the very least, with some level of curiosity that, yes, perhaps these abilities exist. And certainly in my case, completely convinced that these abilities exist in individuals.
It's so great that it's pouring into the collective in this way, because we're in a time where the veil is lifting, and we're going to realize how much more there is to our capacity and how resourceful we are. And it's exciting. It's a good thing.
Yeah. But it speaks to your point about individuals that may have got locked away in institutions and probably still are having gifts, as opposed to being mentally retarded.
Well, the doctors in there are probably the most insane.
Right.
They're actual lunatics that think that they know what the fuck's going on, but it's arrogant and it's crazy. Yeah. So some of the mental ill people are fucking with those doctors hard. They're fucking with their psyche because they can see they're deceived. And so these guys have to become denser and denser in order to keep giving this medicine that has no function whatsoever. All of that medicine has never been proven to work, but they tweak the models with all of these tests that the FDA and all these people do. It's all based on fraudulent science. But everybody's so hypnotized that they just can't face or come to terms with that level of deception. So nobody was willing to look at the how the models, how the control studies were established. There was no control to begin with. So they're trying to prove that these things help when there's no proof whatsoever.
Well, I suppose one way of looking at it is what's the definition of healthy here, right? Well, and of course there will be extreme situations where if people are randomly violent towards others and so on, then
Yeah. I mean,
perhaps there's a case to be made for certain medications having a sedative effect on those individuals. But I'm sure there's a lot of given what I've been learning over the past few years, the idea that in certain cases people are either over medicated or unnecessarily medicated, makes sense.
Yeah. It's unfortunate because with the right people in place that actually were there to help, then things would go different. But because nobody's there that understands what's happening, they've all been indoctrinated to perceive this as, oh, that means you're bipolar because you know what somebody's going to say before they say it. No, that means that you're living in a different layer of perception, which things are happening in a nonlinear way for you. It's a super amazing thing to explore. Bipolar doesn't, so we live inside of these descriptions or classifications that are just man-made and are coming from people who have never moved into the realms of magic, therefore label anything that is such as insanity. But in reality, it's just something more real than the world they are operating from.
Right. Yeah, and this theme comes back again, more real, which I find fascinating because I have had hallucinatory experiences in meditation. I've done some of Dr. Joe Dispenza's meditations, and they've got this is just getting up at 4 a.m. and listening to his tapes, and I've experienced some pretty crazy things.
Yeah.
But I guess I haven't reached that point where it's felt more real. It's felt fun.
Yeah.
But I can't really say I've reached the point where something like that has felt more real than than this reality. But I'm intrigued by that.
Yeah, it's a threshold to cross, and it's available to cross eventually for you if you want, or anyone. It just depends on where we place our attention and where our purpose ends up going.
Yeah. The other thing that now I'm intrigued by this Costaneda character. Can you tell me a bit more about him and his story?
Yeah, an anthropologist out of UCLA who just wanted to do field work. He sort of was going crazy trying to just do, normal anthropology work. And he was given an opportunity to go out through a grant or something to go try to find information on peyote from a real shaman. And he found Juan Matus, and Juan Matus put him to a test to see if he was really willing to learn or not, or if he was just showing up as an academic. And eventually Carlos was able to pass these tests. And then Don Juan kind of, without Carlos realizing it, pulled the carpet out from under him and showed him things that he wasn't prepared to see, wanted nothing to do with, but he got hooked. He couldn't help it. It brought adventure and excitement into his life. And eventually he was no longer an anthropologist. He became an apprentice, and he could no longer refer to himself as an anthropologist because he had been swallowed by the knowledge, and he became the predecessor of this teacher. And then he went around the world, teaching this knowledge, writing these books, sharing and gathering apprentices and trying to help them. He ended up also being associated with other apprentices of Don Juan, and a lot of them were female, and they ended up starting a really powerful group that traveled the world teaching these movements for many years. His books are like a manual because he's such a lucid dreamer that the way that they're written, they like decode and recode your being. And so you're not meant to read them unless you're in a heightened state of awareness. Otherwise, it would make no sense. You have to be really in tune to be understanding what's transmitting on those pages. So that I call them the never ending story, because every time you read them, something you couldn't possibly have understood before is suddenly inside it. It's like, I've read this over and over. How come I never read this part? Well, you did. You just weren't ready to be impacted by it to the degree that you now are. And so the more energy you have, the more these books give, because you're able to receive and then you're able to move your perception to the place in which you truly understand it, rather than just intellectually try and explain it. And so Toltec say that we can live in silent knowledge. You don't need to think in order to know. And those are those unique states of perception where we're just filled with joy and laughter and love, and everything is clear, and our direction and our purpose are in place. There's no thoughts, and you're just in a state of gratitude, and it can be very emotional. And that's what we need, is emotional healing. All of us have like childhood wounds and shadow stuff to still go into in order to get back to that little innocent part of ourselves that is still scared, and get to know what it has to say. And the recapitulation does that. But yeah, Castaneda, he was a trickster. He would fuck with people. He would challenge them. He would, tell them things about their past that nobody could know. And that would scare the shit out of people. He would lie about where he was born and when, and just to get people to talk shit about him. And he didn't care what people thought. And so he was quite the character. And he put people in very difficult situations, his apprentices. He would always say, leave your house and don't come back until you've changed. Like, just walk out the front door, pick one direction to go, and go out and see what you're made of. And he even had to do that. After he'd made millions of dollars selling books, his teacher said, you need to go without your wallet to a small town and beg for a job and a place to stay, and get yourself out of poverty without ever going to your bank account, And he did. He found a man that would let him live in his basement, and he became his full-time cook, and he worked 7 days a week, as a means to prove to himself that he was capable of going from nothing to everything again, just by having the right attitude. And so he would say that it takes just as much energy to be miserable as it does to be happy. It's just where we apply it.
Yeah. Yes. And what a beautiful promise of the work, the way you described that, like in an innocent state of joy and not thinking. And this seems to be again a common theme of. I've had a lot of spiritual teachers on the show now, and this strong distinction between thinking and knowing.
Yeah.
And I even heard this further distinction, which I really liked, which I heard from Dr. Ubuntu Chan. I don't know if you're familiar with her. She's been on the show talking about telepathy. She's taught her kids, and I've seen the videos to mind read and so on. But the distinction between thinking, having an intuitive hunch,
yes,
and then the knowing.
Yeah.
And that was really powerful to me, because I was like, yeah, I can identify with sometimes having a hunch. I'm not sure how often I'm really deep in just a bodily knowing.
Right.
And the idea of spending most of my time in that state is very appealing.
It's so healing. Yeah, it changes everything, and I had to learn how to do it while being in construction management, because I wasn't willing to go back to a normal stress way of interacting with my profession. So I figured out a way to live as if I was on mushrooms all the time. And spirit would inform me of what tasks to perform and when, rather than like be overwhelmed with this list in my head, or, like I just didn't carry the stress, and people were pissed. Like, why are you not stressed? Like, this is such a hard job. They thought it meant I didn't care, but I actually did. I was figured out energy management so that I could go the distance and not get burned out, because I'm not willing to. I'd rather do something totally different if it's going to, I have to. Your purpose isn't about survival and money, it has to be about a long-term sustainability of nervous system regulation so that you can be lucid and not willing to sacrifice that lucidity. But yeah, once you discover silent knowledge, then you're being informed on a deeper level than and that, so those hunches become intuition, that intuition becomes intent. You have a relationship directly to source. You start to be psychic, and can tell. Like I'll have a workshop here in April, and it's already happened. I can already see it. It's already occurred. It's just about people coming and allowing this already established magic to change their lives. And so it's not complicated how we gain access to this way of interacting. Once you come out of the linear, then you're being shown, and it's just so much more harmonious, and you don't have to think because it's being presented. And that's what vision is. Toltec say we're having a vision right now, and that we can leave this vision and go into other visions that are just as real and complete as this one, with freeways and airplanes and all the same stuff. But there are other worlds that are entirely separate from this one, but we can go to them. And then then we have a reference. We won't be so isolated in thinking that this is all there is.
Mm. Wow, immediately that was a simulation theory. I wonder if the Toltecs, if the simulation theory guys are just tapping into something that's already exists in consciousness.
Well, I think there is a simulated construct that's being overlaid in a natural environment, and that's why you could decode events and foresee events. Like the events on the world stage, those aren't going to change. Those are part of the program. Our ability to see through that program and then gain access to what's really there in the lucidity side. But if we're following the world events and we're at odds with what's happening, then we're getting drained by the very simulated construct that's in place to hijack our attention and awareness. So it's like ancient AI almost that is interfering. And now they're trying to usher in a new type of AI that can integrate it all. And it's all coming from this parasitic predator that I'm referring to, that the Toltecs talk about. It's an awareness that's advanced, that lives longer lifespans, and it understands things on a level that we simply don't. But we can learn a lot from this challenger. It's not a negative. It's preparing us by challenging us in this way. We're in a training ground, essentially.
Right. And what you said earlier was it's a choice whether we do battle with that force or entities aligned with that force, right?
But the real battle is becoming conscious in your dreams or in this dream, right? The more conscious you are here, then the more beauty is presented. And if you can be just present in your life, then you tap the eternal now. And then you become a witness, the observer of the infinite. A lot of people would lose their minds, though, at having that much connection and joy come upon them so suddenly. So we want to go slow and honor and not beat ourselves up for our addictions or whatever it is that's keeping us from being able to tap source to the degree that we could. We're not meant to just expedite this process and get overwhelmed. So that's why I teach what I teach. These movements lead to being able to focus in a way that allows you to go back into your past and heal your blueprint or even erase it entirely. And then the lucidity starts to get so strong that whether you're using it during the daytime or at nighttime, it doesn't really matter, because you're learning to make the most use of your time. And you end up saving a lot of sexual energy, because sexual energy and dreaming energy are one and the same. So you learn how to harness that power, tame the dragon, so to speak, so you can use it to boost yourself into deeper levels of intensity and perception.
It's interesting you say that about the relating it to sexual energy, because I was having this experience just today. Like the more I meditate and the more I learn to be in the present, the more I experience this joy. and this,
Mhm.
and it sort of tends towards ecstasy.
Yeah,
And I sometimes have that thought. I was like, this is a little bit like an orgasm I'm having right now.
totally.
And then I had the next thought is like, how how can this be? Like, I've got, I look at obvious relationships in my life, and where my, there's some difficulties with, with my parents and what's going on there, and then I look at my business, and I might look at my finances, and I might look at all of this stuff and think, should I be feeling ecstasy right now? And I'm like, why? I do have that sense of contradiction sometimes.
Good. Congratulations. Yeah, it's good, man. And you can follow that ecstatic. We're designed to be feeling ecstatic feelings
Right.
all the time.
Right.
And then that's what heals the chakra line. And that what makes us be able to properly review the past and remember our youthful feelings. There's like a treasure chest of feelings that move through your chakras that you've forgotten all about from your childhood. And if you could get all those memories back and all that recollection, then incredible things start to happen to you. Memories come back to you suddenly that you almost have to like take a knee. It's like such a strong wave of remembering that comes. And that's just you returning to self, and so our ability to tap silence and handle waves and waves of ecstatic intensity and learn to ride that energy and get used to being there all the time, then the world, the things that would normally stress you out or distract you or weigh on you just don't have the capacity anymore. They've been out, maneuvered in a sense by something much more meaningful and purposeful. And then it can look selfish when you start to really heal and stop giving your time and energy to places and people that aren't in harmony with this life that you're moving into. So you become very boundaried. Your time becomes precious and you prefer to be alone as you start to get to know yourself. The only way to properly have deep, meaningful understandings of knowing thyself is through aloneness. And you start to value that more and more, and you start to find a way to create more of it. Or you can be around people who also value that same level of aloneness, because you're not distracting each other inside of that. You're not getting this like comfort from them because they're not looking for comfort either. And I'm not saying we shouldn't nurture and comfort and love and have partners and children. I'm just saying witches and wizards learn to be very careful with their time. Even if they are in a family, they find a way to not have a normal domesticated situation and bring a lot of magic into the home and into the family line so that there's real awareness as to how incredible each day can be.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. It's great because you're describing, it seems like you're a couple of steps ahead of me, but you're basically describing my emerging experience of life, I think as a cumulation of doing a lot of therapy work, which does chime with what you're saying in terms of going and retrieving memories and reliving experiences and so on, in combination with the meditation.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I'm intrigued with your process. I realize we've sort of hinted at it, but I think we've set people up, hopefully, for some intrigue about how we get to this state that you've been describing. So perhaps you could talk in a little bit more detail about the process you teach and advocate.
Yeah. So, it's reading the material, the Castaneda books, and there's also books called, there's a book called The Sorcerer's Crossing by Taisha Ablar and a book called Being and Dreaming by Florinda Donner Grau. Especially for women, those are the books to begin with because it's a female apprenticeship. Just opening those books and beginning to read them will change your life, let alone, you don't need me. You can do all this by yourself, but you don't have to either, because having group support and being inside of magical courses with people that are advanced is such a boost. So just by showing up to the online courses that I teach will change your life. You don't even have to read the books. You could just go through my system. But I help people to become aware of movements, all these different versions of these ancient movements, the shamans of ancient Mexico, used or practiced or expressed during the peak of their power and the peak of their joy. And this was a long time ago when things were very different than the history we've been told. And so coming out of the lies and deceptions about what we've been told about our pasts and envisioning what the Toltec say was actually going on. And then being able to be open to how incredible it would be to, so the books reveal to you things over time that just unlocks your limited perception. You come out of hypnosis. But in the courses, the movements are primarily focused on as a means to redistribute energy in your energy field and heal your organs. Your organs need love and attention. And there's energy on the periphery of your cocoon, your luminous cocoon, that is crusting over and making us old and crusty unless we break up that energy some way and redistribute it to our organs. Our organs have secondary functions. They're not physical only. They have magical capacities, especially the womb being the most advanced organ. They call it dreaming box. Women at one time used to determine our evolution based on their intent. Women are very powerful, much more powerful than men when it comes to the dreaming arts, when it comes to shamanic traveling. But it's so natural to them that men typically pursue this knowledge and women do not, because women already have access to it.
I was going to ask you, maybe just answer my question. I was like, well, why would that be? Why are all the shamans men then? But maybe that's your answer, right? The men need to go and learn it.
They crave it. They want it. It's something foreign to them compared where women were born with it. So men are designed to go to the top of their pyramid, stand on the top and say, this is my life. This is what I became. Women are designed like this. They already have access to the eternal. But they've been taught to share this power with men rather than get to know this power for themselves. And so when a woman is on her moon time, she's not allowed to go in a sweat lodge with men because she has access to her power on a level that's very dangerous to men in the old ways. Women can go into dreams and do things and heal in ways that are just way more powerful than men, but it's really rare, that a woman chooses to do so because there's this program that puts great pressure on them to remain complacent. That same program tries to convince men to advance on this path and become cult leaders. So the program's always outmaneuvering us by flipping the script on us as best as possible. And it's really effective. It just always seems to work. So what I teach is how to avoid putting anyone on a pedestal, making this work personal for yourself, really falling in love with it, not needing it to be your career, but having a path of heart that is so powerful that it doesn't matter what job you have. It excites you to be alive and you start doing your best at work as a means to just prove to yourself that you can take any situation and turn it into a really amazing thing. And then the universe will then offer you another job, or someone will grandfather you into something because you passed the test. You stopped being offended. You stopped complaining. You started making use of your day. And yeah, so there's just this shift of perspective that moves your perception. So just a lot of people meet with me one-on-one as a means to just help them understand. I help them to reflect to where they are by what they're talking about, what they're complaining about, how they perceive their situation. And then I help them pull apart anything that they say about themselves that isn't assisting in the evolution of their awareness. And I just help people come out of fear and move into trust. But that's a very de-armoring thing. Our fear and is part of our relationships. When we got hurt or when our parents told us to stop doing that, we armor up, and then it's hard to de-armor and receive source support from the sun and the earth, or even from a healer or from the magic of this lineage. But as people train with me, their perception shifts, their life changes. They start to feel a calling and a longing to reevaluate things and get really honest about where they're at. A lot of people are spinning their wheels. Like they're like, I've done so much shadow work. I should be ahead of this by now. Why am I still here? Well, until you can sit where you are and try to, instead of convincing yourself you should be further along, and you're just going to be caught in this regretting and analyzing and desperate need to try to catch up to where you think you're supposed to be. And you're missing all that time of just being in your pain and admitting what wants to move through you. And there's all these emotions that need to come out, but you're trying to keep them down because you're trying to convince yourself you're beyond that state. And it's torture.
Yeah, it reminds me of this meme I saw recently that made me laugh. Like, you know, you're doing the ice baths, you're doing the yoga, you're doing the meditation, you're doing the barefoot walking in the forest. You ever just tried sitting down and feeling your feelings?
Exactly. It's getting wild out there. There's so many tools and everyone's purchasing them all. And then, it's like, I don't have any of that stuff. I don't need that because it's just like baggage. It just represents, but by all means, I hired acupuncturists, chiropractors, healers. I went to saunas. There's a time and a place where you really gotta follow your need to heal, and then, but there's a threshold you cross where you don't need those things anymore, and that's where the adventure gets opened up. Is you're like, you can go and do anything at any time, and turn it into a really incredible experience. Mundane goes away, and there's no need to sort of have these rituals or whatnot. But yeah, some people don't admit to how far along they are, and they're spinning their wheels, staying in victimhood, and just, well, my wife's sick, so I can't, I just have to suffer. But in reality, they've been doing all this powerful work, and if they were to step up to the plate, then they would be provided for, and energy would be reciprocated. So we struggle to reach that neutral zone. And so I see everyone's story is rich and meaningful and full of really potent messaging. So I'm not judging people, even if they're hoarding wealth and power. It comes from trauma.
Yeah. No, it's such a powerful thing. And that's something I made a note of as you were talking. I was expecting you to use the word that you assisted people to heal, but you didn't use that. You said you assist people in the evolution of their awareness. And I think there's a powerful distinction there. And it reminded me of my own attachment to my healing identity. And a healing identity, at a certain point, I had to kind of recognize that even this, attempt to heal was some kind of trap for me.
It's all perspective, right? So some of the most amazing people I know are just the ones that can laugh the most. They don't take themselves so seriously, and they're healing just in the fact they're enjoying life. Like they don't let other people's perception of them interfere with what they really want to do with their time, and they become spontaneous. They don't show up for, they'll cancel things at the last minute because they get an intuitive hit to do something else, and then their night moves into a much more, beautiful potential because they're not caught in needing to fulfill other people's expectations. And this goes to family members and stuff that expect you to spend time with them in the holidays. Sometimes that day is so important to your awareness and evolution that you're going to have to just, invest in yourself and not let traditions or expectations limit you. But you're going to piss people off, when you start to heal because you're not available the way that you used to be. So there's just a lot to be aware of, that every day is an opportunity to liberate yourself from conditions, patterns, and by observing humanity, you become like an anthropologist, and you see everyone's they're in much more pain than they're admitting to themselves.
Yeah.
And then they're not able to, rather than go into that pain consciously and get to know it, they're doing everything in their power to avoid it. And it's really just a matter of kind of helping people to realize that carefully through conversation and help them to learn. And I even drop people into their I guide them in meditation how to go into these areas that they've been avoiding so that they can properly have the emotional release that they need, that they didn't know they needed, that they've been avoiding. And I even try to get people to come out of information and go back to like just watching movies that make you cry or laugh or something, because everyone's gotten so into all the information and they're all kind of black pilled or whatever, to the point that they're not thriving anymore. And so whatever we focus on becomes our reality. And it's okay to go back and give your little child an opportunity to laugh and cry through something simple like a movie again, knowing that, what really, really matters is that our chakra line is healed through emotional healing and through ecstatic engagement with life. And so there's stages that we have to intuit. So rather than heal people, I give them the tools to heal themselves. Even like if I were to remove an implant or something that's in their field, it's likely to come back unless that person is going to change their life for themselves. So those implants or those interferences in people's fields will actually leave on their own when a person reclaims their vitality.
Right. And it's so interesting, the corollary between our physical cells and a energy field or a spiritual self. You might say that when we work on our health, certain parasites will just leave the body. And in the same way, it sounds like you're suggesting that that's also happening energetically.
Yeah, incredible healing happens. It's you, and even for Toltecs, they call it something they call losing the human form. And it's like a part of our energy field is like bent. And when you straighten it out, like everything shifts. So we go through a massive transformation at certain stages of this work. And it can appear to be illness, detox, or sickness at times where you have intense fevers. Things are moving through your field and you're feeling it. And all this stuff is happening to you. And I imagine if you didn't know what was going on, you might hand yourself over to somebody that would try to medicate or control what was happening without knowing what was going on. I think a lot of times that's, is the situation that people find themselves heavily medicated just from having a real opportunity to detox and purge something that wants to come out of them from emotional abuse and trauma of the past. But they don't understand, and therefore they get put in situations where those white coats they just make things so much worse by projecting their fears into you and then telling you need to do this, or we need to run tests here and there. And so it's hard to trust yourself when there's so much fear in place around around not knowing and trusting our body.
Yeah, that's an interesting point, isn't it? That to get to a place where you can kind of almost just consider this.
Yeah, exactly.
Something, right. Given the field that we live in, right? And and I sometimes wonder that about myself. Like, how did I sort of drop through? Like, and without wanting to sound like arrogant or anything, I genuinely, I'm just curious. Like, how did I somehow like drop out of it? I don't know. Did someone like, maybe it's one of, what you're talking about, some entity was like, okay, I'm going to take you out of it. Or I don't know. I just sometimes ponder that.
Just say thank you.
Yeah.
And
it's interesting. I mean, it happened for me a lot later. For you, it happened it sounds like when you were in before you hit your teens, but yeah.
I fell in love with my existence at a really young age, and I was celibate and saving all that energy for this work. When most kids were just, fully just so focused on sex, but I got to have a lot of experience from 13 to 17, so that when I entered celibacy at 17, it wasn't like a normal 17-year-old. I had already, had a lot of adventures with women. With girls, I guess back then, but it was amazing to not even have a single sexual thought for over a year. I was so focused on my training, and that was just one of the most incredible things to realize, that you don't have to be inside of your hungry ghost, what we call, this wounded part of ourselves that's trying to get attention through sex. A lot of the Toltec say the predator runs humanity through its genitals.
That's amazing. Yeah. Yeah. Humanity through its genitals. Right. I suppose that resonates more with that. And that's true for men and women, is that?
Yeah. Whether you're repressing or overusing, like a lot of women shut down their power because they don't want to be preyed upon by men. They actually like become less beautiful, so they don't get interfered with, or, they're afraid. So they shut their power down, and that doesn't work. And a lot of women are acting from the patriarch. They're trying to get things done like men would get things done. And so they're not using their feminine power. They're trying to copy the masculine, and that shuts their feminine power down. And then, a variety of ways of sedating ourselves or whatever, we shut that power down through not honoring, the body's natural ability to just heal on its own. And then there's just men and women couldn't be more different, and so it's really tricky to be in a relationship, and to do the shadow work. But to, a lot of men end up being more feminine when the women are being more masculine and controlling. They're like automatically start to balance it, and they become the spiritual ones. And the women are like caring for all the kids and not able to move into their spiritual power. And they become the task, masters and stuff. And because men are so busy, making the bigger money usually, and then the control over the home and all this stuff just gets flipped and inverted, and there's no real communication. There's just like fear and a struggle to align. So getting past that stuff somehow and being really honest with each other and oneself about where that inversion is going, how it's affecting your love life, your ability to manifest a future together. Because men need to be in their power in order to be visionaries. Women need to be in their feminine in order to be inspired and passionate about life. And so it can be so beautiful and healing when you work with a third party that helps that conversation to become more and more realistic and expansive. And that's also what I do, is work with couples to help them realize that the conversations they've been avoiding because of the emotions that are built up behind them, and the resentment and the bitterness that's accumulated. But once you start breaking up that stuff, we're all human. We all have that stuff. The sooner we address it, the sooner we get clear about what's in the way of a real conversation that's going to liberate the evolution of the relationship. And so instead of trying to keep the relationship intact, when both parties prioritize the evolution of the awareness of each person, then it's not about whether the relationship stays together. It's, is this relationship conducive to us evolving together, or is it now become something that's no longer, supporting our growth? And those are hard, confronting pieces to get to know. But there's a way to rewild as a family, as a couple, without having to break apart. And that's the deepest shadow work, is following through. And if you're not both feet in, willing to give it a chance, there's no way to ever find out what was possible.
Right. I love that idea. Rewilding. I'd love to rewild my relationship with my partner. That's a wonderful idea.
Yeah, there's a lot of creativity and youthful energy you guys can both reclaim and bring back into your lives. And it's just a matter of being aware of it and then remembering to do that, and not forcing yourself or beating yourself up for not being able to do it right away. It's going to take, we live in autopilot most of the time, but there's a way to come out of autopilot and really be aware of how precious each moment is. Like,
Right.
realizing, wow, this person is alive right in front of me, you know? Because if they were dead, you would be missing them and feeling all these things, and you wish you had said this thing to them, but here they are right now. You can say the thing that you would say if they were, you know, like, be aware that at any moment they could die.
Right. Yeah. 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 Well, which takes us back to the Tibetan, right? Tradition of, always talking about death.
Yeah,
Constantly
Toltec say death is the ultimate advisor. It's the only one that'll tell you what's really going on. And so you think this is bad, your death will tell you this is nothing. I've yet to tap you. So you might think your world's falling apart, but if death is there to tell you this is nothing, then you realize this is nothing. I'm still here. I'm still in the game, motherfucker. Like, let's go.
Yeah. Yes. Yes. I love that. I'm curious about the movements. Is it? I'm imagining in my head. It's like, is it like Tai Chi, or is it more like yoga, or what's the deal there?
Yeah, I mean, it's strange. They're abstract. They're more like a Mexican sort of dance almost at times. Some of them are really physical and martial. You know, I can give an example, but you just like breaking energy over and over on the side of your cocoon, and then taking the claw and lending it over and over to your organ. You know, you're moving energy and positions that open up your field, and you're scanning. You're opening doors, redistributing energy,
Right.
breathing in specific ways, you know, just very strange, like awareness. Like it's like you're almost traveling, you're running at times, and then you're climbing, but you're becoming like a person that is redistributing the energy around your field. So and then it can get really soft, and you're like playing with energy. You start to feel like this energy between your hands, and you start to pull it apart and spread it around. Some people don't feel anything. Some people, the first time they do it, they start crying because they remember some part of them. It's just so profound. But there's thousands of these movements, and they get put together in forms that are difficult to remember. So you have to use body memory instead of your mind. And that's what gets you out of the mind. So in April, we'll be doing these forms that are difficult to learn in person in a conference room. And it just fills that whole room with all this incredible power. Everybody's feeling this shift of perception from doing these synchronized movements together. So I teach them in stages, build the form longer and longer and longer until they can complete the whole thing by themselves without having to watch me. Then they can take it home, do it every day or however often they want, and this incredible energy becomes available to them. And then their life starts to change just dramatically because you continue to tap into this lineage just by doing the movements.
Right. Yeah. That sounds incredible. It reminds me, I remember when I went through a period of doing Warrior 3 in yoga, and I'd get floods of tears because there was something about me standing in my power and prideful of who I am, and I'd not been able to do that as a kid, and etc. So, but yeah, so that really resonates, that those deliberate movements that are designed to kind of engage you emotionally are going to have that impact.
And you get really silent. It's a moving meditation that's meant to silence you. And because so many people have done them before me, I'm benefiting from everyone that's ever done that.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. You're sort of tapping into the collective. Yeah.
It's amazing.
Wow. Sounds amazing. Does sound amazing. This is in New Mexico.
I'm in Montana. So
Montana. Sorry. That was an earlier period, right?
I in New Mexico, and we called it the land of entrapment. There's a lot of wizards down there, but I'm in Montana these days. So the next course is in Missoula, and it's April 5th and 6th, and we'll do an additional day on the 7th where we'll take this training into the mountains.
Oh wow!
So yeah, it'll be cool.
Yeah, that sounds incredible. Something I was curious about as we were talking was: is there a Western tradition that's a corollary to this? Is there, because often we get drawn to the either India or in your case into South American traditions for a lot of this type of work. Did it exist in European lineage?
Well, I mean, sorcery exists, and this Toltec stuff is sorcery based. And so the dreaming gates would be discovered by any true sorcerer, whether they used movements and recapitulation to get there, or whether they did so through any kinds of weird, twisted shit you might get into, like human sacrifice. So
really?
Power is available, and we're all under the spell of limitation. And a lot of people get into this for the power, and they cut corners, they cheat, they'll do things in order to gain access to this capacity to travel in other worlds. So Toltecs say there's people that seek power in this lifetime, and then there's people that seek power in the afterlife. And people that are seeking power in this life are usually willing to do things that are corrupting to their ability to have an afterlife or a power in their afterlife. They're kind of putting it all in here, and they're going to try to prolong their life. And that does exist. There are people that have found ways to prolong life or even transfer their consciousness into other people's bodies. So all this AI stuff that's happening is just a representation of something that already exists in nature through sorcery. And so we want to not get corrupted here and not get caught in any materialistic securities, and really follow a path of heart, do it for spirit, not for profit, and save our energy to travel into what we call the dark sea of awareness, the infinite, keeping our awareness intact rather than recycling and coming back into another lifeline. So the Toltecs recapitulate all their memories, because when you die, all your memories flash before your eyes. And that's your memories being devoured by the force that lent you the awareness to begin with. And then you recycle and come back and do it again. Toltecs refuse to die like an average person after doing all this incredible work. They recapitulate every memory of their life, then use that as a replica. And this force that would normally consume your awareness at death will accept your replica so that you can cross over into eternity without losing your memory or your awareness. And so the afterlife is a real thing for Toltecs, and they're not very distracted by this world because they're preparing to walk into what they call the somersault of thought into the inconceivable. And so we learn to bounce from vision to vision to vision. We're meant to be traveling in many, many worlds. We've been tricked into believing this is the only one. And the Toltec's only way of getting out of this trap, which is a designed obstacle course meant to prepare us. It's not a negative just because it's entrapping. And it's not a trap because there's a way out. So it's a way of talking. But yeah, the Toltecs have discovered the secret. And I've yet to find a religion or a system that comes close to explaining any of this whatsoever. And that's why I focus on this knowledge. And I find it that most people are not willing to learn this stuff because it's too confronting. It claims to have actual answers rather than religious philosophical perspectives that lead you into heady thoughts. It's like straight up practical but magical.
Right. Wow. Yeah. There's a lot in what you just shared. Yeah. Powerful. And I was particularly struck by how this can be the point about human sacrifice and how there are, I suppose, much more malevolent ways of using this knowledge or means of accessing the states you've described.
Yeah. Sorcerers are real things, and people do like satanic rituals and stuff are no joke. They do these things as a means to get possessed intentionally, to be under the influence of deities and entities that will then protect you and give you power. And so you wouldn't want to find yourself in one of those parties with the elite. And what they do is things get dark throughout the night, and there's some really twisted shit that goes on in the sexual and in the realm of murder and stuff. It's just human hunting parties. All kinds of disturbing things exist here because there are entities that are really, really wounded that are, attempting to get as much energy harvested from as many people as possible. And these people are all probably were introduced to this way of life as a young child. They didn't have a choice. They got corrupted by their family or something. So it's not like there's any way to really heal when it's been your whole life. And so these people live with dark secrets, and sorcery is ancient and powerful. So it's hard to come to terms with, but it's important to come to terms with at some point, so you understand what we're up against, what we're dealing with, what kind of disturbing elements of intention and attention are playing out and being that are behind the scenes of what we're told and how this world functions. But we're in a unique time where a lot of that's being exposed and people are seeing through stuff, and it's going to get interesting how that how that wakes people up or makes them go more to sleep. But there is a way to break free from all of this and have compassion and not be at odds with what's occurring, and just use this awareness as a boost to your own personal path to free yourself from all these really these traps that exist within materialism or power, so that you can become free. To Don Juan said, you have to learn to walk on both paths, the sorcery path and also the normal path of just life. But there's a middle path. Sorcery is a dead end. An ignorant, arrogant life without being aware of what exists is a dead end. But there's a path in the middle. And if you can handle both paths, then you can step into the path of freedom at the very end of your life. And that's what Toltecs strive to do, is to not get seduced by the high adventure of the unknown that comes with dream power, and really merge with the earth. The earth mother will deliver you to different layers of her onion if you learn how to work with her.
Right. And as you speak there, it makes more sense to me why the sorcery path, as you described it, tends to be treated with a great deal of suspicion and ridicule,
Sure.
disbelief, right, throughout the ages.
Yeah, it's hidden in plain sight. Nobody wants to come to terms with that kind of diabolical focus, so they aren't willing to look at if that might be real, and therefore it can continue because nobody's has the gut to the stomach to come to terms with it, and that's okay. I don't want people to be scared or anything. I live in fear whatsoever. We just want to understand that people get lost and they end up doing things almost like they're under the spell of something, which they are.
Right. Yeah. And as you can tell, I'm lost for words because it is such a dark, deep topic, and it's tricky. I'm finding it tricky to know exactly how to, like address it, right? Like, yeah. And it's
we don't need to try to sugarcoat anything. We don't need to try to make it all okay. It's okay to feel the disturbing aspect of it. And then, just sort of with the awareness that it exists, it's like not give our attention to it in a way that is keeping us from seeing the beauty at the same time.
Yeah, that's right, isn't it? And it's a fun, what's the right word for it? The question I'm faced with is it valuable to shine a light on that? I mean, I was at a practical consideration, really recently. Do I invite somebody on the podcast who claims to have been in these satanic abuse circles and experienced a lot? And is there value in that? Is it better to not put my attention there? It's something I face on a practical level just with the podcast.
Yeah, me too. I mean, often I feel like people that are talking about that stuff, some of them are not being honest, and they're under the influence of forces to try to make us, inundated with all that information. So I think it's a delicate thing, and if people are focused on that as their message, then I would hope to be able to help them come out of that story, because they can erase that history energetically and move into a much more powerful way of living. And then their awareness and their explanations of things would be balanced, and they would be able to help us come to terms with that as well, but not have it be the main focus. Because it's really delicate stuff.
Yeah, delicate's a great word. That's the word. It's a delicate topic. It's delicate because it's not immediately obvious.
Sure.
What your action is going to create.
Yeah.
That's a delicate situation, isn't it? Right? You're not clear on what any particular action is going to create out there in the world, right? Because there's such a great deal of negative energy attached to these topics.
Yeah. It's a good point. And so unless it's a yes, it's a no. If you're not getting a strong yes, then it's a no. That doesn't mean it won't be a yes someday. But right now you just want to follow your gut, your hunches on what, is what feels appropriate.
Yeah. I didn't intend to turn this into an editorial advice session on my podcast, but that's where we've ended up. Yeah. No, but thank you. And thank you for going there, right? All that being said, there is a part of me that feels like it's important we voice this stuff, right? There is this satanic element in society. It does exist.
Yeah. Now, power is a real thing, and there's both sides. So this is a dream, though, so it's not as bad as it seems. It's not so scary, because if we're in a dream, then we're learning inside of a place that's very real, but it's not meant to be taken so seriously. But you can take your life seriously in a way in which you really make use of it. Like, a lot of people think they get another shot at this because they believe in reincarnation. But what if they're all parallel lives? They're not future and past lives. What if they're already happening? And what if your life and how magical it becomes ripples out and affects all your other parallel lives as they're simultaneously occurring? So if we're in a non-linear situation, then this lifetime is everything. And we want to wake up as soon as possible to that and go all in. Assume this is it, and that there's a chance to have a chance at discovering all that is, becoming fully aware. Toltec say you're born with the totality of your being, and you die with the totality of your being. But in between, you forget all about it. Death reveals what you are. Toltecs strive to become aware of their totality prior to their death. And then they no longer relate to the world because they've activated their dream consciousness. They're able to do things with their perception that nobody's going to believe them or understand. And that's what gives them that aloneness to become all one, to become one with all things. What you perceive, you can become the thing you're observing. You can merge with the environment. You can practice gazing until everything starts moving. So you're gazing at the snowfall, and all of a sudden you're having a psychedelic experience where you feel like you're flying inside of these snowflakes, and then they become like the stars, and now you're in the galaxies. You're cruising in other worlds just by having freed yourself from the normal perception by staring at the snowflakes long enough until something happens. It's that simple. And so we just want to begin allowing what was happening to us from 0 to 2, 0 to 3 years old. We were seeing energy. You look at babies, they're tripping out. We can go back to doing that again with the consciousness and awareness of all the experiences we've had. But if we can return to that position of perception, the world becomes mysterious and energetic again. And then everything, takes on a different meaning. And then it doesn't matter if you're in a jail cell or on a vacation in Hawaii, your ability to drop into the depths of your perception becomes accessible everywhere you go. And then you're no longer putting certain situations above others. The mundane goes away. And that's the breakthrough.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's certainly something that completely resonates, and I feel like I'm dropping into more and more. It's just
good.
feeling some version of ecstasy in
Totally
any and all situations, and and it's something I'm integrating because you sort of have this idea that it's that somehow you have a right to feel good if you like achieve certain things, or this is true. It's like you've almost been brought up with these algorithms of if X, Y, and Z is true, then feel good. Not X, Y, and Z, then not good, right? Like, and none of that's true.
No, and then everybody's going for the outcome rather than enjoying the journey.
Yeah.
And they're not living in the present moment. They're missing out on the opportunity to just stop and take it all in because they're just focused on getting this task done, or they're focused on the orgasm rather than the just the experience, of having sex with your partner. And then, so Tantra never gets discovered because you don't learn about all the different areas in which you could explore, and therefore you just have a limited perception of what sex is, or a limited perception of what snowboarding is. If you eat the right amount of mushrooms at nighttime on the backside of a mountain and you're alone snowboarding down, all this powder, and all of a sudden everything gets so incredible that you've unlocked a secret. You don't need to tell anyone, but you now have an outlet that you can utilize as a means to heal yourself through ecstatic experience. So I try to help people to get it, like go out and get it, whatever it is for you. Go do the thing that you really, really want to do because it's going to heal you.
Yeah, do what you love.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and you can see how this gets so caught up with the satanic invocation. Do as they will, do what you want. Which it's a fine line, isn't it? It's a fine line.
Yeah, I mean, we need to be trained and understand how that line, where that line is, because what you really, really want is to have an amazing, harmonious life where you're connected to source and you're of service and you're not hurting anyone, because you're ultimately hurting yourself if you're hurting others. So these people in doing do as thou will entered into a world in which it's like they got seduced and tricked to go after some hungry ghost part of themselves that wanted to be fulfilled, rather than their true spirit, their soul doesn't actually want anything to do with that stuff. But once you cross the line and you're inside of it, now you're under the influence of what you've connected to by doing it. And it's super sad.
Yeah. Yeah. And perhaps it's something like the difference between doing what you want and doing what has you feel joyful, right? Like something like that. And knowing that. Go on, sorry.
Well, I would say that, rather than manifest what you want, listen and spirit will tell you what you're here to do. And when you receive that vision, then you're of service to something that's really beautifully guiding you, and you're not having to make decisions from any wounded part of you. So you're really listening instead of trying to create what you think you want. So I don't pray or ask for certain things other than joy and laughter. And then everything that comes is going to make me joyful. And, so I'm not needing it to have any detail other than that, and in this way you let spirit guide you rather than be caught in thinking you know yourself enough to know what you even want. We don't know ourselves.
Yeah, it's interesting. Have you read Michael Singer's The Surrender Experiment? No, so his is the story of becoming, I don't know, certainly I don't know if it was a billionaire, but whatever, extremely wealthy. Sure. Basically through, and the premise is he achieved it through surrendering to, to God or to spirit, or to just be guided moment to moment. I'm just going to be guided. I'm not going to want for anything. I'm not going to have any goals. I'm just going to be guided moment to moment to moment. What's going to have me be joyful? And then 10 years later, he's flying on a private jet, doing a deal to sell his company for millions. And I always struggled with that story. I was like, yeah, but can I really just completely let go? Surely I need to want something. Like, I've got a family to provide. Like, surely I've got to want to have enough money to pay my mortgage. Like, even with this is how I sound, but I'm still in the place where I sometimes struggle with that idea, right? But I think you've helped with what you've just said.
Yeah, I mean, it's there's a way to break patterns that are keeping you from getting supported the way that you could. If your patterns are heavy and routine based and they're fear based, then any sort of shift that brings more magic into the field, it doesn't have to be done extreme like maybe he did it, but sometimes the higher the risk, the higher the reward. So these leaps of faith and following your bliss, allowing things to be presented to you. It's the same thing as Carlos saying, leave your house and don't come back until you've changed. There's so much adventure. There's somebody out there with a message for you. There's experiences that you wouldn't have if you didn't put yourself in those really unique opportunities to be shown. And so, you more practically, you can start spending more and more time in nature and start to just allow your nervous system to get so regulated that you're getting the support and ultimately, like that man's story, that money could end up he could end up identifying with all that wealth, and it could keep him from his freedom if he's not detached from it. So the story may not end as beautifully as it began. Like, everybody ends up going through opportunities to, let go and become even more liberated. It's a real subtle thing.
Well, yeah, I mean, and I don't know exactly how he ended up, but from my understanding was he took all of that money and pumped it into building his temple and buying land around the temple and for people to come and worship for free, and then chose to live in one of the house that is the carpenter on the. And it's a great story. I mean, in the end, who knows? But
amazing.
What I love is what you're saying is that the more we allow magic to enter our lives, like the better it gets, and that is a leap of faith. And yeah, it is a leap of faith. I think, I feels like I've taken some big strides, and there's more. There's further down the rabbit hole I could go, if you like.
Yeah, and the like Toltec's, like what Carlos did by going and walking away from his money and trying to figure out what to do, how to survive. There's other ways to do that as well, where you just, like a Toltec's, once they have become really powerful, they'll go seek out employment with somebody who's really tyrannical and ego based to find out where they're at as far as keeping their center.
Yeah.
So life becomes a training ground, and whether you're wealthy or not, you still go enter into the matrix intentionally in order to test yourself and to gain the fluidity, the patience, the ruthlessness, the clarity, the cunningness, the sweetness. All those things are needed in order to get in and out of situations like that without getting beat up. And that's where a warrior really fine tunes himself, is in real life situations where actual people with positions of power can hurt you or destroy your reputation, or do things that could really even be lethal. Like they put themselves in, old Toltecs would go enter into slave camps, in Native American slave camps, on purpose, just to prove that they can get out, because they trust that this dream is magical and that you can do like Houdini shit in a variety of ways. You can even talk somebody into taking your handcuffs off of you when you learn how to hypnotize people with the power of your words. So they were freeing themselves from death by walking into situations that would almost ensure that they would die, and then realizing that they can't die because they're so happy, they're so jovial, they're so creative. There's always a window of opportunity within this dream to come out of a situation that seems, that it's already going in a direction that it can't be changed. But Toltecs find out that this really is a dream, and you can almost stop the world, and magical solutions will free you if you're perceptually open to them.
Yeah, that's extraordinary. It's extraordinary. It reminds me about, I got some advice when I was doing my early therapy work. There's a school of thought which says, right, you should sort of, what was it called? Defu, dissociate from your family of origin, right? Like, and the counter to that was, no, you never want to defu. Don't like, you want to keep going back, because that's going to stir you up, and that's going to show you where you've still got more work to do. Like, don't ever defu. Like, keep going until you can be with any one of your family members that you've got stuff with, and can be totally fine and normal around them. And I took that advice, and I think it was the right advice.
It's really, really helpful to hear, because like Ram Dass said, if you think you're enlightened, go spend a week with your family.
Okay, yeah, there we go.
But Carlos Castaneda, he told his apprentices to leave your family, because they're the ones that project all the limitations onto you, and you need to ghost them so that they have no idea who or where or what's going on, so that they can't project onto you with concrete understanding. They can only, and then you'll free yourself from their fears. Unfortunately, he was telling apprentices to do that weren't ready to do that. And then they did try to force themselves to do that to impress Carlos, and it just caused damage for them and their family. So I'm glad you brought that up. And I could see both sides of it, because there is a time and a place to be free from any expectations or heavy pressures from people that have the ability to, affect you based on their fears or wishes for you. So it is a dance to be open to different times in your life where you might need a break, or build your power up, so that when you do go back, you're not getting drained by those.
That makes sense. And I did a level of cocooning where I created some distance to do the work. But I think that the idea to do it permanently, I question, right? Not just because of the hurt it's going to cause them, but also because it's could potentially limit your own growth.
Yeah, it could lead to getting really lost and thinking that that you are putting yourself above people.
Yeah.
Right? If you can go, like, I hang out with people that are living on the street. I hang out with people in situations that most people wouldn't. But I gain so much from the observations, especially like schizophrenic people, how quickly they can go from laughing to sobbing and back and forth again. What we call the assemblage point is moving so fast And it's just fascinating to observe, and it's really deeply moving and painful and beautiful all at the same time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Oh God, this is such a wonderful conversation. The, I suppose I'm still getting stuck a little bit on this goal idea. So you're having this retreat. So is this something that's just kind of come through you, or is that an example of a goal you have to like achieve? Like I'm interested in the
Totally.
manifestation process you're using. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, I was always going to be private and just train under others. I have teachers that taught me this stuff, and I was all into that. I didn't ever want to be, being interviewed or any of this. But in 2020, those people that I was training with, they went along with all the bullshit, and it fucking flipped my lid. And I just couldn't believe that these really psychic people, were not able to see what was happening. And so I then was like kind of in a predicament because I still wanted to continue the work. And so I started a YouTube channel. I started meeting and talking with other people and started offering, those that were interested to explore this kind of work. So other people teach this stuff. I'm more teaching it to the black sheep of the world. And the people that I was training with are teaching it to all the kind of the normies now.
Okay.
So it's that and confusing to me, but I hope to bring all the students that I've gathered to them someday so that they can understand what real warriors are, because they're all just in this little realm of deception around what's actually going on. And so they're not able to benefit the way that I am from this work, even though they were direct students of Carlos Castaneda. Carlos was very academic, and he would talk shit to people that didn't have PhDs. He was kind of an asshole at times. And he was condescending and judging. And now, I get that because he was just disgusted by hippies that thought they understood all the shamanism and stuff. He's just like, dude, you guys are so disgustingly blind to yourselves, because he was the real deal.
Yeah.
So he was like, be a lawyer or a doctor, learn how to be in those fields and not get drained by that corporate intensity, rather than run off to the desert and try to copy my book. And so he was talking shit to people for a reason, because everybody was trying to like be like him without having to do any work, just eating mushrooms and thinking they've seen God or whatever. But anyways, that conditioning of thinking that academia was really important, I think, is what ultimately is now causing these people to not be able to see what's going on, because they really value the universities as a source of information that's accurate, and they're not able to come to terms with the fact that we've been lied to about our history, about medicine, about cosmology. All these things are based on either inaccurate understandings or purposely deceptive lies. And so it's really hard to be the black sheep in this time. But that's why I'm now sharing this instead of studying with them.
And I admire all of that. And at a purely practical level, I'm like, what's your? Because I'm still getting my head this idea of simply surrendering and following the joy and following the bliss. Just practically speaking, you want to put a retreat on. Are you like visualizing that retreat and have a clear set of intention, and this is what I'm going to do, and this is going to, or is it more like just day by day you're like follow my joy and these things just happen? Like I'm curious at that level.
Yeah, so it's an intuitive weekend where nothing is planned other than a particular movement form that I will prepare to teach. In the future, I won't even prepare a form. I will intuit a form, and we will learn it together. And therefore, it's totally intuitive, and there's no work that goes in ahead of it other than securing the location, getting the waivers printed out, and just showing. And magic happens. Conversations, the questions people ask, the the direction in which it goes is guided, and people have really profound healings. They reach levels of silence that have never happened to them, and then they feel connected to the earth. They feel more rooted, more grounded, but also lighter, capable of dreaming and having clarities and waves of feelings come over them that guide them to come back to the next one. And a lot of these people work with me one-on-one online, as well as being in my online courses. All of it's intuitive. So it's a group guided intuitive dreaming practice. And yeah, all of this has just been revealed to me in a vision. I foresaw doing all this a long time ago, and I couldn't imagine how it would play out, because, I knew it wasn't going to be with some part of me knew that these people weren't, that I thought I was having the vision with this group that I trained from, but then it just didn't quite fit. And now I'm understanding what my visions were. But one of those teachers is very magical. She's sort of separate from the group and isn't really concerned about any of it. But she told me, she gave me permission to do this a long time ago. She said, "You're not like anyone else here." And, so you already arrived at this work having already accessed what we are here to access. So, you're free to go kind of do your own thing. But at the same time, I have to be careful with all of it, because there's an aspect of some of the people involved in that other group are, will be offended potentially if my system grows and gets bigger than theirs. And then I might find myself in a little bit of spiritual battle. So these things can happen with just people, where you end up having to deal with challenges that come with people that are offended. But I hope that they can see the amazing work that I'm doing, and that all the amazing people that I'm training, and I'm happy to give them all an opportunity to be trained through that system. But I don't see any of my students wanting to go learn from people that stood in line to get jabbed and wore masks. And I'm attracting a different group of people that kind of freed themselves from that stuff and therefore have found this work.
Got it. Yeah, that makes sense. And what I heard you say in terms of your manifestation, because process was you saw it in a vision. So because where I'd take it, the questioning here is more about, at a practical level, leading my life. How do I kind of orientate myself to reality if I'm kind of in this pure following my joy type situation? And it sounds like one of the ways we do it is through receipt, or at least in your case, is receiving a vision and then taking steps to fulfill on that vision. Is that right? Rather than coming up with what's my plan for this year or something like that.
Yeah, ideally you wait until it's really revealed to you in moments of great clarity. So I had a really stressful life. My wife had health crisis. We had kids too young. I was breaking my body as a carpenter, just trying to barely make it, and there was a moment where, I was really losing a lot of energy, and I was really dangerous place where I was going to end up becoming, a bitter person. And so I recognized the delicate nature of that. And I was able to take some actions to free myself from the stress that was accumulating. And a lot of the injuries I thought were injuries from carpentry were injuries from stress. And so I just had to come to terms with what was actually happening, and not let other people's perception interfere with my knowing, and spending a lot of time in the woods alone and really allowing myself to, get to some places where I could cry or really come to terms with how much pain I was in. And I was given and shown this incredible feeling came in which I was told that everything's going to be okay. And it seems so simple, but it really changed everything. I stopped living in fear because I trusted that guidance that I experienced. I started to be able to let go of needing to try to fix things and started to trust in a process that would unfold. And that's what I've been following that feeling all the way through. And I stopped having to live, and so I'm not very task orientated.
Yeah.
I don't concern myself with how the neighbors perceive my garage. Or I don't need to keep up with the Joneses or, feel secure. Like I'm renting a house. I move all the time. I don't own anything. I have kids that, are 19 and 22, and most people would be trying to generate wealth to make sure their kids are not going to be in any danger and try to have all these investments figured out. I don't have anything, but I don't need to. In fact, I know everything's going to be incredible and I'm going to have abundance of financial support in one way or another. And so, when I hear people saying, "Oh, I don't know, I own this house, I can't move," and I'm like, why not just sell your house and rent? Like, why are you limiting your perception of anything at all? Like, you have to invest in you in order to make sure that you're going to thrive in the way that you're meant to in the future.
Yeah.
And so you come out of this need to be secure and you start to take care of your energetic self rather than so much the physical, safeties and securities. And then the universe recognizes that you've come out of fear and old patterns, and it will start to support you, and you'll get grandfathered in. Someone will invite you on to be interviewed on a channel that all of a sudden you have all these people that want to train with you just from one interview, right? So
Right.
just however it flows, just allowing that to flow.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. Yeah. That really helps, actually. That
Good.
really helps. Like, answering it partly for myself, I can imagine listeners as well being like, yeah, but how do I kind of manage my life? Right. But I think you've done a good job of explaining it. It's like allowing the visions to come in and then.
Yeah. And you don't have to quit your day job to have a vision. Like, you can still get done. Whatever job you have, find a way to not get drained from it.
Yeah.
While you're there. And that's the ultimate freedom, is when you're no longer letting mundane things drain you. And so, but sometimes you got to walk away from a situation is draining you in order to take that leap of faith, in order to realize. So it's just about, there's no rules to this. It's very intuitive. We kind of can't paint a picture that fits everyone's story.
Yeah. No, that makes complete sense. Like that being joyful, energized, any situation, any moment. And again, back to Michael Singer in his book, he describes like one of the most enlightened people I think he'd experienced or heard about was an Indian guy who's a police chief in a town in India. And that was his job. That was his job. One of the most enlightened people on the earth, as far as Michael was concerned. Right.
It's amazing. Yeah. Reading books from people who were just totally liberated perceptually, like Tom Robbins. He wrote a lot of fiction that helps people to move into realms of spontaneity and freedom and not taking things so seriously. And I hung out with a lot of cannabis dealers who, before it was legal. And so they were living life on the edge, but they lived in this real free perception where they didn't have appointments, and, they would do whatever they felt like at every moment. And that only lasts so long unless you find a warrior within that learns how to get in and out of those places without getting, caught up in the drama or the drugs. But there's some real adventurous souls out there that really know how to laugh and have fun. And there's a way to connect with people like that so that you're constantly in conversations that don't ever finish, that they go from one funny ass thing to the next. And you're just inside of the most hilarious experiences together, traveling, having a beer for breakfast, whatever it is to break out of all these things that people think need to be a certain way. It can be really amazing to just take life by, make this life your own and not fall in line.
Yeah. Yes, I love that. It's so funny. I did a meditation a few mornings back, and like it was this guided meditation, and you ask for guidance, and so I said, okay, give me guidance, and the answer come back was laugh more. That was that's what I heard, like in my head. And then the second part of this guided meditation say, and now ask for a sign.
Yeah.
And so I was like, okay, tell me a sign, and then I end up a podcast with you, and you're telling me.
Cool.
Yeah. About finding people who just can laugh in any situation. Like that's such an important point, isn't it? We're so attracted, aren't we, to those spirits who are just as spontaneous and full of laughter in every moment.
Yeah. And I use music as a means to really get lost in silence or trance out. And it's when really profound feelings move through me through this love for music. I feel this incredible ecstasy, and then sadness usually follows it because I've made room. I've cleared the chakra line through this incredible feeling of love, that all this stuff that didn't have the capacity to move through me finally has this open gate. And it's just like, you can lose the ability to discern whether you're crying, your tears are of joy or of sadness. They all kind of merge.
Yeah, that's so funny you say that. I've been through. There have been times when I've been crying my eyes out and smiling.
Yeah,
I'm like, how's this possible?
Yeah. Oh, good, man. Me too.
And it's so strange, isn't it? It's like, but there's a smile that comes like,
yeah.
Yeah.
It feels so good. Yeah. Cause those emotions that are moving are getting you to your real self. Like when I work with a woman and she helps me to drop into my pain, and then it's like throwing up, like a wave of crying and then another wave. And then, I got another wave. And then I come out from under that and I come up and she's like, oh, there you are. Because I just wasn't being truly me. I was wearing a mask of sorts because I wasn't feeling the unresolved emotional pain that still resides within. So there's always an opportunity to go deeper. There's fractures and wounds from way back, relationship stuff, patterns, entering cults, whatever version of abandonment in which you experience, whether you abandon yourself or someone abandoned you. There's just stuff that our body knows how to heal. The body keeps the score. And once we get to the somatic, but a lot of somatic people are in their heads and they're intellectually explaining somatic healing, and they're not able to help their clients to the degree that they could if they could stop residing in the intellect. And then there's ones that really understand what they're doing and are able to drop and follow you and understand what you're feeling. And they become empathic to the point they can feel your pain for you. And that's a real gift to be able to handle, to be able to hold space for people to heal emotionally.
Yeah. Yeah, I sometimes find people who do the somatic work or other forms of sort of trauma healing that they kind of they use the pain like an instrument. Like there's this I suppose belief or stance that we want to feel like a bit of our pain to kind of give us insight into why we behave the way we do, but they kind of instrumentalize it, like, but it's there to like, give us an insight. But that's the insight is in the head, and I'm like, it's like it's not in service of the head. No, right. It's just there. Just feel it all.
Exactly.
Just feel it all. It's not like it's there. You're not like feeling your pain for some reason. Like, yes, you just feel your pain. Just be in your pain, all of it. Like, beautiful. If you get insight's great, but like that's not. That's the way I see it. That's not the point of healing.
Yeah. So I intentionally drop into that, not trying to fix it, just be with it, like you said. And that's where all the healing happens, not in, thinking my way through it or attempting to achieve something. I just sit with it. And it's like a homecoming.
Yeah.
It feels good to go be with your wound.
Yeah, like abandon yourself. That's, to me, it's like like abandon yourself to it. Not like try and work with it. Like no, just like, surrender to it. I suppose that's maybe a big theme of this podcast is just surrender. Yeah, I sometimes get animated when people describe that form of healing in what seems like a sort of slightly sort of managed way and truncated, almost like just like feel a bit of it enough to get the insight to why you back. No, just feel it all. So anyway,
Yeah, it's their own limitation of their own reality projected onto the person they're trying to help. And most people think consciousness is stored in the brain, that we're only physical beings, and they don't realize that this whole thing is feeling. It's all interpreted as thoughts, but everything begins as a feeling. And if you can just stay in the realm of pure feeling, then you become a shaman. Shamans are not in their mind. They're in their body, their energy body. They're feeling everything with every fiber of their being because they become fully activated in their awareness.
Yeah, I'm glad you said that. Yeah. Yeah, you don't like feel in order to, like, it's the whole thing.
Yeah, it doesn't make sense to people. They need to have an understanding that's linear and mental.
Right.
So
they need a rationale. Like, why would I want to, they need an answer to that question. Why would I want to feel my pain? Or why would I want to go there? Okay.
Yeah. It's amazing. Yeah, it's simple. And so it's like well-protected secret. It's not for everyone. It's those of us that realize the simplicity. Everyone else is going to remain complex. And you and I and others get to come out of the complexity, go into the simplicity, and then and everything heals because we're not meant to be complex. And simplicity is what keeps us from discovering the secret, and it makes sense. Like, so near-death experiences, things, deathbed moments, everything comes into perspective all of a sudden. You're like, you don't end up on the deathbed wishing you had spent more time in the office. Like, you really come to terms with the things you really loved about your life. And so you start being aware of your death more now and move deeper into feelings, because there's a reason why dementia and Alzheimer's and stuff happens is our perception's meant to be moving, and there reaches a point where if it doesn't move, then it's going to move on its own without any control, without us having any say. So we want to get to know our most deepest desires and passions and feelings and move our perception in a way that would allow us to gain access to altered state so that we don't end up with dementia and Alzheimer's. We've learned how to go into those other places consciously. And so that all happens through having greater capacity to explore silence and deep states of focus and meditation. Focus and meditation are opposite, and yet they're one and the same. When you're truly meditating, you're focusing on the abstract. When you're truly focused, everything gets empty because you've accessed an awareness of what really matters, which is not something within the realm of mental. It's in the realm of pure feeling.
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah. That makes, I'm just really appreciate that. Right. I did. This idea of the pure feeling state, and it. Yeah. And that's what this is. Yeah. That's what it is. We're feeling. Yeah.
Yeah, but when you ask a shaman what's the secret, if you can silence your mind, everything changes. So just silence. You can force silence. You can catch your thoughts and just shut them down and hold your attention. And all this stuff tries to come in, but you just start to spend more and more time being able to stay in silence for longer periods of time.
Right. And stay in feeling. Yeah.
It needs to, yeah. So it is, you don't have to force silence. You could just follow your feelings for sure. But if you're not using your will and intent, then you're likely to get back into your mind without realizing it.
Mm.
You can be having the most profound experience out in nature, and all of a sudden you're walking back to your car. Why? Why are you leaving? You just had a breakthrough. Keep, like, stay with it. But we just all of a sudden find ourselves, looking at our watch. I don't wear a watch, but we just do these things. We look at our phone and all of a sudden we're scrolling there's part of us that's trying to keep us from really capitalizing on these profound moments. And so you start to stalk yourself and realize your unconscious behaviors and become more clear on what it takes to come out of autopilot. You have to keep coming out of autopilot multiple times every day. It just finds its way back.
Yeah. That's so. I relate to that. I totally relate to the scrolling and
yeah,
and that. It's like I can take the intensity for so long, and then I need to. It's like I'm addicted to thinking. I'm addicted to mind. Maybe that's the last addiction, right? I've worked through a few, but it seems like, maybe that's the current one. Is definitely becoming aware of my addiction to.
Yeah,
because it's not really I'm addicted to the phone. It's I'm addicted to the thinking process that I think that the phone elicits.
totally. And I'm not saying we should. The first thing to come out of is shame and guilt for what we do with our time. I mean, there's healthy shame if you're doing something that's hurtful to people, then, but if it's just shame and guilt based on the fact that you're not disciplined, we want to love ourselves as we are as much as possible. And I enjoy distractions. I love being on social media sometimes because it's hilarious. So it just depends on where you are within what stage and how to sort of really listen to, for one, how to start your day in a magical way, because that's the blueprint of your day. So the first thing you're doing is, connecting into this cyborg experience of having access to all this stuff, then you're just missing out on this very natural transition from sleep into your day that could be a really beautiful way of setting up the day. But then, over time throughout the day, maybe you do want to check in and know what's going on in the world, and that's fine. It's just whether or not you're becoming less and less attached, or if you're starting to become more, hooked to these distractions, and just being honest with yourself so that you can take a couple days off or do whatever you need to do to disperse those distractions and connect in a more natural way.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah. Love that I have a phone addiction, and love that I can move away from it gracefully. Yeah. Awesome. Now that, I could go. Maybe this is an example of me wanting to get back to my car, and I should really keep walking in the woods. But I could keep walking in the woods with you for another few hours. This has just been incredible. Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you so much, Joel. I do need to. Well, yeah, here we go. Meet some family obligations.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. So just a reminder then, for people who would like to join you, I suppose, again, for the retreat, and then to work with you 1-to-1 or 2-to-1 in the couple formation, just remind people where to go.
Yeah. So joelschafer.com. It's JOELSCHAFER.com. And you can sign up on April 5th and 6th in Missoula, Montana. Just fly in here or drive here, and we'll be meeting somewhere downtown. I think it'll be the Hilton Inn, the Hilton Garden Inn. And yeah, we're just going to practice this shamanic training together, and it's really powerful. I do online courses that can be purchased, both recorded versions and present live classes you can enter. The current class is called Resilience, and the last class is called Multiplicity. And then my one-on-one sessions, you can go to the mentoring link and just it'll send you to my Calendly, and you can just sign up for a 90-minute session or even a 30-minute discovery consult call that's free. So if you feel curious about how it would affect you to spend some time with me, a lot can happen in 30 minutes. So take advantage of that. Reach out whenever you feel called to connect, and we'll schedule a Zoom. It'll auto schedule a Zoom call for us, and then we'll just meet up that way. So feel free, anybody that's interested. Yeah, thank you, brother. I appreciate the time today.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you for your time. Yeah. This has been brilliant. Yeah. Just a great experience. Yeah. Really appreciate your presence and your energy and the insight, all of it.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me.
Okay. Thank you, Joel. I'll leave you to your day. I know you've got appointments scheduled. So, yeah, thank you so much. Thanks.
Very welcome. Look forward to speaking with you again. Take care.
Oh, yeah. No, I'd love that. That'd be great. Okay. Thank you.